Good morning, everyone. Today we're going to be doing a video on precision reloading for PRS competitions. This isn't going to be a big long gear video. This is going to be more of a process video of how I go from a spent piece of brass to a loaded round ready for competition. We'll be using Lapua 260 Remington brass. This will actually be its 6th loading, and so far no loose primer pockets or anything along those lines, so it's been holding up for me really well. I've got various batches. Some have 6 loadings, some have 3, some have 2, but this particular batch has 6. I can usually reload an entire batch, of 100 rounds. I probably could do more than that really in a day. It all comes down to equipment setup time and tumbling time. Really, that's really the big things. If all my equipment's already set up ready to go, then it's a pretty quick process. And then the tumbling, that's where I lose a little bit of time. I'm kind of hoping to get another wet tumbler here pretty soon. That way I can speed up this process. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and take you guys to the first step, and I'll go ahead and kind of touch on the equipment that I use and the process that I go through and the measurements that I take, and kind of walk you guys step by step through how I create my precision ammo for PRS competitions. Alright guys, so we've transitioned to our first station here. I use a Hornady lock and load single stage press. It's one I bought a long time ago that served me well. Couple little add-ons from Inline Fabrication, a ergonomic roller handle, and a strong mount, which, man, it helps your longevity at the press a ton. So any single stage, they pretty much make one of these strong mounts and these ergonomic handles for. I highly suggest them. They're worth the extra money. Coupled with that, we will be using just a standard Hornady number 4 case holder. We'll just slide that in there just like that. And we will be using a Lee decapping die. Like I said before, I wet tumble. So in order to wet tumble, we always want to remove the primers before we get started. So this step is super easy. There's a couple more pieces I need to install on the press. It's just a little primer catch tray. We'll slide that in there. And then just kind of a little guide almost for the spent primers whenever they eject to where they will fall into the spent tray. I do use a rubber glove when I do this. I mean, just because this is the chance you're going to get more carbon on yourself than any other. So it's nice to have a rubber glove just to kind of keep your hand clean whenever you do this step. So I do use these in a few steps. I don't use them in all the steps, but a few steps I do. So all we're going to do is we're going to take our spent brass. I'm sorry. My brain is in a different spot. Number 4 was what I used for my 223 brass. We are going to use a... Oh yeah, well this one's not even labeled. We're going to use an RCBS number 3. So that's what we're going to use today. I kind of have a hodgepodge of shell holders, as you can see. So we'll take this, take the brass, slide it right in there. We'll come up. It's going to decap the primer. See? Super easy. That's all we're trying to do is just get the primer out of there. And then we're going to go straight into our Thumbler's tumbler. This is an old school tumbler right here. There are newer, better options on the market, but this thing has served me for like 6 or 7 years now and it won't die. So we will toss the brass in there. Okay, and I'll just show you guys how quick this process is. So it's just up and down. The decapping die takes a little bit more effort with smaller brass just because it doesn't want to slide in there quite as well. But with the large primer stuff, man, it's just smooth and steady. But I won't bore you with all 50 rounds. That's pretty much this whole process. Take the piece of brass, slide it in your shell holder, come up to the decapper, go till it stops. It has decapped the brass, and you toss it in your Thumbler's or your Frankfurt Arsenal or your Lyman wet tumbler bucket. Once we get all 50 deprimed and tossed into our bucket, we will put 1 tablespoon of lemon into the tumbler with it, and we will put a 2 Mississippi count of Dawn dish soap in there as well with hot water. So fill it up with hot water, 1 inch from the top, put a 2 Mississippi count of Dawn and a tablespoon of lemon, and we're going to let that tumble for about 30 minutes. And all we're really trying to do with this first tumble is just get the contaminants off the inside and outside of the brass so it doesn't scratch the dies. We're not really concerned about it cleaning it and shining it so much as just removing contaminants. So I'll go ahead and do the rest of this batch of brass, and we'll go ahead and let this sucker tumble for about 30 minutes, and then we'll come back and we'll jump on to the next step. Alright guys, we're going to do the only part of this process that invades my wife's space, so we're going to try to make this quick and get out of her hair. We've tumbled for 30 minutes, so now we are going to take some hot water and we're going to rinse our brass off. And you can see the water's a little dirty, but not bad. Got my little shaker pan. And once again, this isn't the end-all be-all cleaning. We're just really trying to get the suds and soap off of the brass. Okay, now that we've gotten all the soap as best we can off the brass, I'll just set out a little dish towel here and put the brass in our dish towel, and then just kind of dry off the face of it a little bit. It's not imperative that you get it completely dry during this process because we are going to put it in a dryer. Okay. We'll shake it around a little bit, make sure we get the water out of the inside. Whoops, and drop brass everywhere. Okay. I'll grab that piece I dropped real quick. Ugh. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to split our brass up into 2 trays that goes in our dryer. Alright, so now let's head to the other room and let's go ahead and put these pieces of brass in our dryer. Alright, so the next step in our process, I know I was telling you guys about my case dryer. This was something I purchased the other day for about $60. It is incredible. It's the Lyman Cyclone case dryer. We're just going to set our trays in here real quick. And it says it'll do 1,000 223 cases at once. It's got a timer. It's got a catch tray for water. It's incredible, by the way, because I used to use my wife's oven, and I got into a little bit of trouble with that too. So we're going to set our 2 trays of brass up here, just like that. Then we're going to take the rest of the trays and the lid. See, it's got 5 trays. So, I mean, realistically, I could put probably 50 pieces of the 260 brass in each tray. So I could put probably 250 pieces in this case dryer and it could dry it without a problem. So we'll just stack everything else back up. And it's got these little vents in the top where it's almost like a convection oven almost. It's constantly blowing hot air through the brass. It's got this little timer on the front. So we're gonna set this for about an hour and we're gonna let it go ahead and go through its drying process. Once it's dried up, then we will move on to annealing and sizing. So we'll go ahead and set this. And you guys don't have to watch this. We'll fast forward and go to the next step. Okay, so our brass is finished drying, and so now we're moving on to the next step. I anneal every single loading, partially because I have a piece of equipment that does it quickly and effectively, and partially because if you want to keep the most consistent neck tension possible, this is the way to make sure that happens, or this is one of the ways to ensure that happens. As you can see here, I've got an annealer sitting in front of me. As far as the price for this bad boy is, I mean, I think it was $300, and you're not going to find a better annealer for that price. It's one of the cheapest, other than like a DIY option that you can get. You can see it basically uses a torch, an adjustable torch right here, and then it runs off of either the little camping propane bottles, or you can get an adapter to do a large propane tank, but I don't have enough space in my room here to do that. So when you set this up, you can set the flame intensity with this knob here, and then just control your bottle on off back here. And then you also have a speed percentage output right here that you can adjust higher or lower. And once you determine what that speed is for that particular piece of brass, it's pretty consistent, you know, plus or minus, you know, it goes in percentages, so plus or minus 2% to get it just right for that piece of brass. So to recap, so far we have decapped, and then we have cleaned, and we have dried, and so now we're on to the next step. So we're going to anneal now. So I'm not, like I said, it's not a how-to video. I'm not going to show you how to set it up and do all that fun stuff. I've already done it. So what we're going to do is I'm going to show you how quickly this thing can run through about 45 pieces of brass. And sometimes it does need a little bit of, you know, on-the-fly adjustment, but that kind of stuff's pretty easy to do. And we're going to go ahead, we got a little run stop button here, which is super convenient. Alright, so it's looking pretty good right now. You can see, we'll just go over a few things while it's going. You can see on the annealer, we're hitting right here where the neck and the shoulder meet. That's where our flame is touching. We want our flame to be about an inch long. And whenever we anneal, we want to make sure that we're getting that good color, but that the flame is never turning orange to signify a burning of the brass. Best way to do that is to have test pieces, like trash pieces of brass, and basically you just run this thing down until it turns orange and see where that point is on your trash brass, which you can use over and over and over again, and then back it off about 5% or so, 5 to 8%, and that gives you a really nice coloring, and it prevents you from burning away any of the material of the brass in this process. They sell like a larger pan that you can put under here. I don't have it, so sometimes I gotta kind of be careful. Whenever I get up to about 50 pieces of brass with the 260, it'll kind of build up eventually and get up underneath the wheels, and you kind of got to knock it down. But as far as the unit itself, that sucker just goes and goes and goes and goes, and it's very consistent until you start getting low propane in the bottle, which you can do about 2,000 rounds on one bottle. So, you know, you do have to think about that every so often. But you can see how that one caught up. But that's pretty much all there is to it on the annealing side of it. We'll go ahead and jump forward.
Alright guys, so we are completed with our annealing phase. We've allowed the brass to cool back down. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and move on to our sizing phase. What I normally do is I will take the brass once it's cooled, and while dumping it into a container that I don't mind getting all gooey, which is a cardboard box reinforced with some duct tape. Pretty simple. Or you can get you like another plastic container and make sure that it is pretty much dedicated to lubing the brass, because this lanolin lube that we use it builds up and gets kind of nasty over time. So we'll dump the brass in the box, and right now I use Dillon case lube. It is so similar to a lot of other products. It's basically a lanolin lube, which is, you know, your 99% isopropyl I can't pronounce it this morning. 99% alcohol and lanolin mixed together. Only problem is I've had this stuff for so long. I bought 2 bottles of it, and it has been good for years. So what we're going to do is we're just going to put a couple sprays back and forth, and then we're going to shake up the box a little bit. Okay, we're going to give it one more spray, I think. One more shake. There we go. That'll be good. That's all we need to use in the lube. As you can see, that's probably why these things last 5 years apiece. And what we want to do is we want to let the alcohol flash off, which is going to take about 10 minutes or 5 to 10 minutes or so. So we're going to let these flash off, and we're going to come over here to the press, and I'll talk to you guys about my process of actually sizing the brass. Okay, so we've given the brass a few minutes to burn the alcohol off of the lube. So now we're going to come over here to the press. We've already spoken about the Hornady lock and load press. I use a RCBS full length sizing die with the seating or with the expanding button removed. Also, we still have our same RCBS shell holder from before. So the only added tool for this step is we have our, just a Cabela's brand, 6-inch digital micro or caliper with the Hornady case comparator installed. So this is how we're going to figure out how much, you know, headspace we are, or how far we're bumping the shoulder back whenever we do our sizing process. So we'll go ahead and grab a piece of brass, and we will put it in the case comparator, kind of wiggle it around a little bit. So we're right at like 1.6265, which is about right. That's usually right there to 1.627 in my rifle. So what we're going to do is we're going to zero this so we know what our baseline is. Okay, then we're going to put the piece of brass in. Okay, going to size it, and then we're going to put it back in here, and we're going to see how far we bump that shoulder back. So on this one, it's 5 1/1000ths, which is a little less than I usually like. So let's take and just adjust this die just a hair. Okay. See where we're at now. Unfortunately, on these big dies, sometimes it's tough to get it wherever you want it. And there you go. That about 1.5 thousandths. So that's pretty much where we want. We want like 1 to 1.5 thousandths. Okay, so we're going to turn that off, toss that in our bucket, and then we're going to go ahead and lock this die down. So we'll go ahead and turn this lock ring until it's tight. Tighten our little Allen bolt. Okay, and we're going to check one more just for S and G's. Okay, so we're going to get her in there. Okay, 1.267 or 1.627, like we had talked about earlier. All right, we're going to zero that. Okay, we're going to size it. Okay, we're right at 1.51 thousandths. That's what we want. All right. So now I do a two-step sizing process. Okay, this is the first step, is going to be the full length sizing without the expander button. So let me go ahead and run through this process. Everything is set up, everything's dialed in. All we got to do is be the monkey on the handle right now. So I'm going to go ahead and run through that process, and then I'll jump back in here and let you guys know about the second half of the sizing process. Alright, so now that we've got everything full length sized, we're going to move on to the second step of our sizing process, which is my Mandrel expander. This is something that I've started doing here really recently, and it has yielded excellent results so far. Basically, this is just a Sinclair expander die with a neck turning expander mandrel. Now, the only difference between the neck turning expander mandrel and the regular expander mandrel is that this one is 2 1/1000ths under bullet size. So it's going to give you 2 1/1000ths of an inch neck tension versus the regular mandrel, which is going to give you 1 1/1000th. So a little bit more neck tension. For me, it's been a really big change and a really awesome improvement. So this little mandrel just goes inside the expander die, and I don't know if you guys can see that very well. That's got an O-ring in there to where it just kind of floats. So you cinch it down tight and then back it off just a little bit to where there's just a little bit of tension with that O-ring. And so what this is going to do, I'm not worried. I don't neck turn my brass. I don't believe there's enough advantage in it for like PRS style shooting. But I do want the inside of the neck to be dead on the money. Not so much the outside I'm concerned with. My chamber in my rifle isn't that exact. So from here, we're just going to do step 2 basically. So we've gone through and we've full length sized. Oh, my hand's kind of sweaty, so it's not wanting to go in this glove. Okay, so we're just going to go on to step 2. So we've expanded, or we've bumped back the shoulder, our 1 to 1.5 1/1000ths. Now we're going to expand the case mouth with the expanding or mandrel. Okay, well, I can't talk this morning, so we're just going to come down, push that through, and come back. And so the concept, I'll let you guys know while I'm doing these last couple pieces. The concept of an expander mandrel over a sizing button is that the expander mandrel, just like when you full length size the outside body of your brass, it does the sizing motion on the upstroke of the brass. So it pushes everything down, and by doing that you have more support for the brass as it's moving, and because of that it induces less run out on the case neck. Okay, so when you're reloading, you want to make sure that your case neck and your bullet are perfectly in line with the rest of your brass. And so whatever you have to do to make sure that's as aligned as possible is a benefit. So we're going to do that. I just had a few pieces left here to show you guys, because I know it probably gets annoying watching me do all 50 pieces. Okay, so that's all we had left for the expander mandrel. It's a super simple process, but the expander mandrel, this was a question I had whenever I started using it. It is used after your full length sizing die, then you use the expander mandrel, then you go on to the next step. So at this point, we've gone through our sizing process, so now we need to go ahead and get all the lube off and give one last good clean for the brass. So we're going to actually let these tumble. The first time we do it for 30 minutes just to get the crap off. This time with the lube on there, it takes a little bit longer. So we're going to let it go for about 3 hours and pull it out, put it in the dryer for about an hour. So this is about a 4-hour process. This is the longest delay that I have in my reloading process. So we're gonna let it tumble for about 3 hours, put it in the dryer for about an hour, and then we'll come back to the final brass prep stages and the actual making of the bullet at the very, very end. All right, everything's been cleaned for the second go around. So now we're gonna take and go through the final prep process on the brass. You'll see a couple of the tools I have here, and I'm probably going to butcher the way this is pronounced. I call it the Gurad powered case trimmer, and this is an incredible tool. I believe when I bought this, it ran me about, I think it was about 500 or 400 maybe, and I've had it for like 5 years. But it trims, chamfers, and deburs all in the same step, which is freaking awesome. So it really speeds up the time. I also back that up because sometimes the brass won't be quite long enough in order to, so that it needs a trim. So when that happens, I always have my little RCBS case prep center, which this is the older model. They've got a newer model out that's a little bit nicer, but this thing won't die, so we're just going to keep using it. And I have a chamfer and debur tool, a neck brush, and then a primer pocket cleaner right here. And you can see I've already done some of this brass to try to cut down on the amount of time this takes in the video. And basically anything that does not, if we don't get any trim action here, then I just will pull the brass out, come right over here, chamfer, debur, brush the neck, and clean the primer pocket. The reason that I've got to clean the primer pocket, because when you wet tumble with the steel pins, the primer pocket comes out perfect. But when you don't use the steel pins, which is a lot more convenient, the primer pocket still has a little bit of gunk in it. Not a lot, usually just a 1 or 2 second swirl on the little brush here is more than enough to get whatever crap you have left out. So use our little caliper here and see where we're at on this piece of brass. So on this one we're like 2.28 or so. Usually I try to keep my trimmer to the minimum. It just keeps everything consistent, and I don't trim every time. Really, honestly, this brass didn't need to be trimmed this time around, but for the sake of the video, I figured we'd go ahead and show you this step, because it doesn't do any good just to tell you I skipped a bunch of stuff. So we'll go ahead and turn these machines on, and they're a little bit loud, so I'll probably try to keep the talking to a minimum while they're running, and then once we complete these last few pieces of brass, then go over the next step with you guys. And you can see it just took off. I don't ever go all the way to the minimum, and that's 2.25. I always go like 1,000th up, or 2.26, so it's dead on the money and it's trimming. So then we'll clean the case neck, hit the primer pocket, and that piece is done. Okay, And you see how quick that process was. Let's bam, bam, bam. Like 100 pieces of brass does not take me long at all with this system. Obviously that was only 5, but you know, you get the gist of the process moving along. So now that we have got our brass is completely prepped. That was the last, you know, trimming and conditioning the case mouth. So now we're going to go ahead and go to the priming phase. Okay, for the priming phase, we are going to use some CCI number 200 large rifle primers. We're going to use those, and I have just a, this is another one of those tools that has been around forever, just a Hornady little hand primer. This is what I use to prime my brass. I always have. There are different tools out there, but this one has had it forever and it works great. So we're going to use this. So we'll go ahead and load up our primer tray, and we're just going to load up 50 primers. So just half the box. So we'll just kind of hold it just like that. Flip them over. Okay, and we'll use a little shake tray to kind of get them all facing the right direction, which that was easy that time. Move them around a little bit. I try to do my best not to touch the primers. Some people are more paranoid than others about touching primers, but that's something that, I don't know, it just seems like you wouldn't want to put oils on the item that makes your bullets go boom. It's just me. Alright, so from here, I highly recommend safety glasses if you're concerned about a primer detonating. I always make sure to keep the case mouth facing away from me, and I always this hand primer has a real tactile feel to it. It's really easy for you to judge how much pressure you're putting on the primer, so there's no guess if I'm about to crush a primer and have one go off. I'm sure that there's many stories out there where people have had a primer that they thought seated perfectly and it went off, but I assure you that I do take precautions. So we'll put the brass in here. As soon as we get it started, I tilt it away from my face and then prime the brass. You can see just like that. It's a super simple process. You know, some would say, you know, well, why don't you prime on the press? You know, why don't you have a bench primer? I mean, it's kind of the same thing for my other tools. Why fix what's broken, right? Or what's not broken? So I kind of just, a lot of my tools are older and they work just fine, so they just continue to be used. And nothing has come out that's struck my fancy as being a whole lot better, or a whole lot faster, or a whole lot better feel. So I just keep running what I brung. But let me go ahead and you'll see this process just gets monotonous, just like most other processes in reloading. You just want to go slow and steady, and you know, pay real close attention to the amount of pressure that you're using, and that you don't get any kind of primers that, you know, hit on the edge of the primer pocket, or any loose primer pockets. If you guys ever get a loose primer pocket, you know, you can always tap it on the table and see if that primer wants to slide out any. If that primer wants to slide out any, that case is done. It's not going to do you any good. But as long as it stays in there under a little bit of jarring effect, then it's still sufficient enough to shoot. So let's go ahead and finish up the rest of this brass, and I will start busting out the old Charge Master and a couple other pieces, and we'll finish out these bullets. Thanks, guys. Alright guys, I hope y'all are as excited as I am to wrap up this video and get these bullets fully ready and to send down range. You can see I've got a whole bunch of stuff set out here, so I got my camera kind of set to a wide shot here, but we'll kind of go close in through each step as we complete it. I just wanted to give you guys an overview to start with. First of all, our components that we used through this entire process were Lapua 260 Remington brass. We used regular CCI 200s, large rifle primers. We're going to use Hodgdon 4350 smokeless powder, and we're going to top that off with Hornady 140 grain ELD match bullets.
I mean, we could probably go to a burger or something a little bit more expensive, but for me personally, these have always been more than accurate enough for anything that I've needed to do. So we're going to keep running those because I like them. You'll see, as far as equipment goes, I've already filled the hopper and calibrated my ChargeMaster 1500. This is an older piece of equipment. It is going to be replaced here pretty soon with a Auto Trickler V3 scale. They're a little pricey, but being able to measure down to two 1/100ths of a grain is going to be an incredible difference in our long range accuracy on distance shots. So I'm super excited about that. But the ChargeMaster has served me well for years and years and years, and so we're going to continue to use it on this video. So we got the ChargeMaster 1500. It's all set up, ready to go, and then we have our brass just in a regular old plain Jane loading block. Plastic funnel, which is getting replaced pretty soon with a nice Area 419 billet aluminum funnel set. I'm excited about that. We have a Hornady ogive gauge, and this is going to be, it's a more accurate way to measure your cartridge overall cartridge length consistency than just tip to base, because tip to base can vary a little bit more, but typically ogive to base measurements only vary like maybe 2 1,000ths at the most. So it's a very accurate way to measure your seating depths on your bullets. Coming over here, we're still using the same Hornady lock and load press, but we are topping it off with a Forester Ultra seating die with a micrometer stem on top. This die right here has been awesome. It's done everything I've asked it to do and more. It's super accurate, and it's self-centering and spring-loaded, and so it does a really, really good job. So now that I've kind of gone an overview, and the most important thing, a new loading sticker. Make sure you always have a new loading sticker or a piece of masking tape or anything to signify these bullets when they're done. Because the last thing you want to do is load up bullets and have no idea what's in them, when they were made, what the specs on them are. It's just not a good day. So always have some sort of identifying mark on there. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and kind of zoom you in so you guys can see each step. And we'll go ahead and start this final process for getting these bullets loaded. Okay. For the sake of time, I'm just going to load up like 5. And we'll do those 5, and then we'll wrap up the video after that. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set my ChargeMaster to 42.6, which is my charge weight for this particular load. Okay, and hit dispense. And you can see it'll beep whenever it's done. We'll check and make sure that see, that's kind of a little bit of an overcharge. So, and that does happen. I'd say that happens on this ChargeMaster like 1 out of every 50 loads probably. So I guess it's good that we'll get it out of the way on our first one. So you can see just dumping a little bit back in, got it back to 42.6. So we're going to put our funnel on, add our powder. Give it a little tap to get everything to settle back down. We're going to put our pan back on here, and it's going to load us the next charge. Okay, we're going to do this 5 times, and then we're going to go on to the bullet seating part. So let me go ahead and kind of fast forward the video here real quick, and we'll get these other 4 charges loaded, and then we'll move on to the next step. Alright, I know I got my head cut off a little bit, but in order for you guys to kind of get a better view of what we're doing down here, I wanted to do that. So we've got our 5 cases that are already charged. So we're going to take our case, we're going to put it in our shell holder here, and then we're going to take our Hornady ELM match bullets and slide it on top. And so, a little preface, I leave this set for this bullet and this brass combo. So it's usually pretty, within 1,000th or 2 dead on the money. But with these little tick marks, it's super easy to adjust if needed. So we're going to put this on here just like this, come up. We'll go ahead and seat the bullet. Okay. And then we'll take our little ogive measuring tool. Put it on here. And we are looking for 2.238. And you can see it's 2.239. So within 1/1000th of an inch, it's dead on the money. Okay? So very, very cool. All right, we're gonna go ahead and put this one in our ammo box over here. Okay, we're gonna do it again. Okay, and you can see I've got a little light right here in my press. I know y'all have seen that this whole video, but it allows me to kind of look inside that case and check and make sure that everything looks good, you know, that we're not having an issue somewhere. Okay, we'll check another one. I usually check like 2 or 3 to get started. And same thing, 2.238. Okay, so we're going to drop like 1/1000th of an inch off of there, or 1/2,000th, about like that. Okay. Come up, stab the bullet. Let her go up in there. Okay. Oh yeah. So now we're at 2.238. I like it. Okay. So first 3 bullets, we checked where we were at. Everything looked good. Okay. So guys, I'm going to go ahead and load the rest of these bullets up and get a full box of bullets here, and then we will go ahead and wrap up this video because there's not really much else to what I'm doing at this point. Well guys, I hope you guys enjoyed this little look into the way that I reload for PRS competition. There's always new processes coming out and different ways of doing things. This is just my way, so I hope you guys got something out of it. Kind of saw all the different steps, and I know it was just an overview, but got to see all the different steps and how they go, and can decide on your own reloading process from there. You can see we've got our new load data on top, and we have a nice 50 rounds for a good little old range session. One thing to note when you do load. Always keep track of your powder lot number. Sometimes lot to lot you can get a little bit of variation in your drop, and the last thing you want to do is go to a range session or a competition and have 2 different lots of powder, and your dope ends up being off somehow halfway through the competition. So I always try to make sure I put the lot number of the powder on the box so that whenever I do go to the range or when I start going to these competitions, I don't grab 2 boxes with different powder lot numbers, so something changes in the middle of my session and I'm like, oh my gosh, what do I do? So just a little something to pay attention to. But that wraps up this video for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and we'll catch you on the next one.